It's nice to see you today. This is my first time in Jakarta. First time in Indonesia as well. And I'm here today to give a talk that I've been delivering now for almost 10 months. This is going to be one of the last times I give this talk because 10 months has elapsed. The future really does belong to people who do things. It really is. You just got to go do things. And I'd like to describe that we're in a moment in time, because right about Boxing Day, almost a year ago now, an engineering leader came to me and said, "Hey, can you go deep with AI over the Christmas break? Can you play with AI over the Christmas break?" Like, sure, I've tried this before, did GPT-3, wasn't that interesting, whatever, right? So I gave it an impossible task. I said, can you convert this Rust library to Haskell? Include a test suite. Run a build after every change. Basic computer software engineering stuff. Run a test after every build, because that's, you need to know, you need to have a bit of feedback loop. And I took my kids down to the local pool. I just had this thing running in a loop. And when I got back, I had a fully functioning audio library in Haskell. Now, Haskell is probably the worst language to use for audio. I gave it an impossible task. My jaw was really on the ground because it wasn't regurgitating Stack Overflow information. This was essentially transpiling from one language to another language. How the heck was it doing this? So I offered a blog post. And in that blog post, I concluded in saying, end period from now, software engineers who haven't adopted or started exploring software assistants, frankly, aren't going to make it. They're just not going to make it. Engineering orgs are split between those who have had that moment in time and those who have not. It really is. The engineering org is split between those two. And in life, I've been fortunate enough to deal with exponential change. My background is in software development tools. I bring software development tools to market. And I started writing more. I said, hey, we need better tools. We just need better tools. Everything's been designed for humans first. And in that, I said, hey, wait, if anyone's played anything like World of Warcraft, you're familiar with the notion of multi-boxing. It's the idea of leveling multiple characters at once. And I wrote this back in March. It's like, hey, what if we, instead of design for IDEs shackled back in 1983, it's designed around humans, what if humans were second? And I started questioning everything. Why does an engineer only pick one story? Why is it a norm for an engineer to pick only one story? This is weird. And I started enumerating through the organization, and I started thinking, well, it seems like my co-workers are stuck thinking if I had a co-worker. And I did this writing out there. My mentor, Annie Betts, who's at Anthropic, slid into my DMs. It's like, no, Jeff, you're wrong. What if you had 1,000 AI co-workers and they went ham on your backlog all at once? And I was like, ooh, there's a lot of capital allocated into OpenAI and Anthropic and all these big frontier labs. If this is how they're thinking, it's on. It's on like Donkey Kong. So it seems like our profession is a bit of a crossroads, kind of like an upskill or perish type moment. Because it didn't take long for founders to start saying, I'm no longer hiring junior or mid-level software engineers. It won't be long until AI is writing all the code at Gumroad. This was back in March, folks. Much time has elapsed since then. This is Sahil at Gumroad. It didn't take long before other founders also chipped in and saying using AI effectively is no longer optional. It is a mandatory baseline expectation to be an employee at Shopify. These mandates are now common in Australia. They're becoming more common worldwide, actually. I'm not sure about here in Southeast Asia, but in Australia, in America, and in Europe, these mandates are becoming now common. Hey folks, my name's Jeff. Previously the AI software productivity tech lead at Canva. But you might know of me from my work recently to standardize all the different coding agents out there through the Agents MD specification. Through that, we've been able to essentially get VS Code, Copilot, pretty much all the main coding agents to standardize on a single file name, which is lovely. But the problem with standards, maybe it's a little bit too early. Maybe it's a little bit too early, folks. Here's a photo from a conference I delivered this talk at a couple of weeks back. And in there, they were presenting, here's some of their best practices. Right? And if we have a look at here, some of their best practices, you might notice something. That they're using uppercase. They're using uppercase. Here is the best practices from OpenAI for GPT-5. And GPT-5 specifically says, use overly firm language. It can backfire. So everyone is out there implementing like all these different cursor rules and all these server-to-server specifications, server-server MCPs, but they're all kind of tuned towards a single model provider. They're tuned towards Anthropic. OpenAI says specifically, don't use uppercase. Everyone's using uppercase. You know, and like it's all over the place. You probably have by this time an exquisite collection of cursor rules within your organization. How much uppercase is in your cursor rules? It's not just as simple as selecting between different models. Each one of these models have distinct behaviors they need to be tuned for, and then if you use them from one way to the other way, it can backfire. Another thing I see is it's really important to use one context window per task. It's really important to use one context window per task. I see so many people using Cursor, Claude Code, and all these different things. They implement one feature in a chat conversation, and then they use that chat conversation for an unrelated feature. And they wonder why it's getting poor performance. And like it's basically you're putting unrelated units of work into the array for consideration of inferencing it. And it doesn't work. You use one context window per task. And you might see things about 1 million context window, yay. No, folks, you only got around about 176K usable. Like, you want to keep your context window really, really small. So it's actually around about 200. The reason I say 176 is because you have overhead. You have overhead for the LLM model itself. You have overhead for the coding harness that you use, Cursor, Windsurf, Claude Code, etc. And that's around about 176K usable that you can use. But you might have seen everyone talking about MCPs. Wow, MCP is going to change everything. So if you take the top 10 results, or like you Google what are the best MCP servers to use in Cursor, you'll come across this list. And I went through and tokenized the top 10 MCP servers that according to Reddit. And here we are, we've got the GitHub MCP server at almost 580,000 tokens. So 58,000 tokens. And I see a lot of people saying, hey, why don't I get good outcomes? It's like, well, because you're allocating way too much into context window. If you use the GitHub MCP today, go through your engineering org, uninstall it. It has one use only, and that is for server-to-server communication. Do not use it for local. Do not use it, uninstall it. You get better performance just by uninstalling it. If you want GitHub, you just tell it to use the GitHub CLI. It knows how to drive it. So less is more, less is more. I've seen people down, by the time they've done all their cursor rules and all these different things, they're down to 84K usable context window. And they're wondering why they're getting bad results. It's because you're over-allocating your context window. So this is part of some of my ponderoos. I publish a lot on my website for free at ghuntley.com. And there's probably less than 1,000 people that really get it in the world right now. Like, they actually have the techniques to be able to automate software development. So I publish for free, hoping to increase that number. And in that blog post, when I published it, people are like, hey, Jeff, what do you mean some software engineers are not going to make it? What do you mean some are not going to make it? How do you mean the engineering orgs are split? So I had to explain the performance vitality curves that exist at every single company out there. Because at Fruitco, the company does 6-month performance cycles, right? And nearly every company does this. I'm going to speak in abstract. Grape, who has historically been a high performer at an organisation, is stuck up here up on this cliff saying, hey, prove it to me that this is not hype. Right? This used to be me. This used to be me. And AI comes along, and eventually, vitality curve gets applied within the company. Grape's no longer at the company. What the heck just happened? What the heck just happened? This is happening really fast, folks, because there seems to be a schism in engineering orgs between 2024 knowledge and 2025 knowledge. As tech lead, I was able to map through these people transformation stages, my personal and enumerating through the engineering org Canva. It's like, prove it to me that it's not good enough. They start playing with it. And over here, there's just like, oh, I'm using AI, and then I'm automating my job role with AI. You see, founders have discovered that these tools work. They've discovered that these tools work, and what they want for an employee is completely different. The skill knowledge from 2024 to 2025 is completely different. They want the knowledge on the left plus the knowledge on the right. But it seems like most of the engineering orgs are stuck on 2024. It's really, really weird. So I concluded in that post and saying, hey, look, there's not going to be mass layoffs due to AI. There's not going to be mass layoffs due to AI. There's going to be a natural attrition between those who invest in themselves and those who don't. The thing that's going to displace you is going to be your coworker, folks. The coworker that invests in themselves. You see, it seems that some people kind of get stuck in the middle here. They're like, oh, well, I have a job in the future. Well, I have a job in the future, and they have a decision. Do they run back up on the hill on the left, or they dig in and invest in themselves? It's really interesting. So if you're an engineering leader, it's very important to actually build the supporting mechanisms and guide people through the engineering org, through these transformations that will need to happen. It's important that you have these people transformation phases and you don't accelerate too fast, because you can break people. Like, it's pretty scary. The more you learn about these tools, the more you understand what is possible, which I found it quite circular. Or like, even when myself invested so much, I found myself like wanting to run back up to 2024, because every time you discover something new, it sends you straight back up the hill. You're like, oh God. Like, you could be up in 2025 and you discover something new and like, woof. So it's really important to retain people who get it. Now, I won't hire anyone who's up on the left side of 2024. I only look for people who are post-2025, who have been through that emotional stage and understand and invested in themselves and can articulate how to actually drive AI well. Because I remember walking into the office back around in March as a tech lead over at Canva, and I'm like, God, there's so many people who just don't get it. Like, I remember like walking to the office and saying, feeling like kind of like the sixth sense. I see dead people. Like, not that they're literally dead. It's like they don't have a job. They just don't know it yet. One of the tech leads over at Canva has been applying some of this knowledge, this 2025 knowledge, and so far he's managed to displace the roles of 20 people. Next couple of months, he'll be able to automate the roles of 70 people. Right? It's all because they're applying themselves in learning these skills. They're able to automate their job function. Founders want people who can automate their job function. They don't just want software engineers or data engineers. They want software and data engineers who can automate their job function, and AI allows them to do that. So I started writing more, and these days I start thinking more and more about things like the Overton window. Overton window is normally a concept in politics, but it can also be mapped to concepts like disruptive innovation. You see, like the Overton window, if we apply it over to just a simple concept, all AI must be in the IDE. The reason it's in the IDE is because it's not scary, folks. It's not unthinkable. It's radical. If they went to market with AI outside of the idea, all the engineers would be truly spooked. But it's been 10 months, and we're already starting to see that. Like last night, Anthropic released AI is all happening on Claude.com. We've got Gemini, we've got Codex, we've got all these things. So the Overton window is slipping. What is normal, what is sensible, what is unthinkable, and what is radical? What is unthinkable 10 months ago is now sliding into the acceptable and sensible realm. Don't know which way the window's got to slide, but it is sliding. Yet, unthinkable things are happening. Unthinkable things are happening. On my YouTube channel, you'll find tens of thousands of hours of me running a coding agent, AFK. I'm down at the pub drinking beer. And here we have 4 agents autonomously programming Erlang while I sleep. The proof's all there. Managed to automate software development. And what you saw there is a baseline AI orchestrator. I don't know if this 2027 or 2028 or 2029, but I want you to think about something. If you think about when you're using Cursor or all these other things down here, the AI coding agents, what you're doing is essentially you're the AI manager. You're software engineers. You're meant to automate things. When you see failure domains, you should be able to identify and go, oh, that's a pattern, that's a pattern. Why don't you automate that pattern? The more you start automating those patterns, the more you start getting towards things like orchestrators that can automate software development. And then all of a sudden, we've gone up a stack. So the software engineers being like the managers of AI, they're not dead, they've gone up a level stack. So this is happening, There's large communities online who are focusing on building orchestrators of AI coding agents. If you're using Cursor day to day, like one-on-one babysitting, no, you've got to go up a level of abstraction. There's a lot of power when you go up a level of abstraction. So last month, I did something pretty unthinkable. I launched the world's first programming language that was vibe-coded completely by running coding agent AFK for 3 months in a loop. That's what it was all on YouTube. This is Cursed. Cursed is a programming language like Golang, where it switched all the keywords to be Gen Z. Yeet, slay, you name it. It's all in there. I now have complete brain rot. It's cursed that it's possible. It's cursed in the amount of code that it managed to generate. You see, generating code is no longer the issue. In those 3 months, I generated 4.5 million lines of code. How does someone review that code? Like, how does that all work? It's also cursed in the sense that, like, how cheap it was. That only cost me $11,000, $12,000 US to make a brand new programming language. And I was just AFK, just watching it. Now, it's also cursed because it's 3 different programming languages. I first did it in C, then I did it in Rust, then I did it in Zig. I did 3 times over to test each different language to see which language is the best for vibe coding or vibe engineering. So really, something that used to cost tens of millions of dollars US now really costs about $5,000 US because I did it 3 times over. That's cursed. So I want you to think about, you're probably going to hear a lot of things about what like an agent. You hear this word all throughout the conference and all for you co-workers. But companies will soon be asking this as a mandatory interview question. What is an agent? Well, if I was to say, what is a primary key, or what is a linked list, this is 2024 knowledge. You should be able to tell me straight up, what is a primary key? 2025, why are the software engineers flinching? Why are they saying, what is an agent? Why can't they give concrete specifics about what an agent is? Interviewing in 2025 now, I only look for people who can actually sit down on a whiteboard and say, Jeff, it's 300 lines of code running in a while true loop. That's an agent. And they can actually show me the inferencing loop. So this is the difference. Show me one, build me one. Here it is, folks. That's an agent. You take input from the user, You run it in a while true loop. You see if it wants to execute a tool. If it wants to execute the tool, you execute it. That could be bash, it could be anything you like. You take the results of that execution and you put it back for more inferencing. This is the big scary boogeyman that people are worried about that's going to displace their jobs. It is that at its most core thing. Cursor, Windsurf, all the coding agents. I professionally built coding agents for a living. They're about 300 lines of code, running in a while true loop. It's really simple to build your own. You should build your own. Have a look at the workshop there, where I teach people how to build it. This is base knowledge now in engineering org. Because someone can be highly experienced as a software engineer in 2025, but they're still experienced. It doesn't mean that they're marketable, their skills are marketable in 2025 now that AI is here. Really depends. Have they invested in themselves and their personal development and learning? You see, LLM outcomes are mirrors of operator skill. It's something I've been thinking about. Within an engineering org at Canva, there was 2,000 plus engineers. I swear to God, there was probably only like 5 or 8 people who really, it sunk in and got it. They only got it. And I speak with other CTOs out there, similar, another CTO I was speaking with last night, 70 engineers. He only found 2 engineers who really get it in the 70 in his engineering org. That CTO is planning on punching on, moving on. He's going to poach those 2 engineers and go start his own thing. Because it's really weird. Across a large amount of people, there's a lot of engineers who just won't get it. Or they do get it because they've lived with high control. To get good at AI, you need to actually surrender some of that control. So one of the most pressing issues going forward is how do you identify someone with skill? Let's say you're a hiring manager. How do you find someone good with AI? Because, here we go. The typical way of doing it would to do leak code. All these HackerRank and all these coding things. And here we have got cheating tools being brought to market. This is Cluey, also known as Interview Coa originally. So Roy used this to automate getting offer letters at all the FANG companies, right? Completely automated. So the typical way of like identifying skilled talent is like we've got to review it. I've been thinking about it a lot. Perhaps the best way to determine if someone is skilled is just to watch them use the LLM. Just to watch them use the LLM. The same way you can see someone's productive and how they use the IDE, you can develop an eye. So at Canva, we redeveloped our interviewing rubric. AI is now permitted in the interviewing steps, and like how they use Cursor and all the other tools as a leading indicator whether they understand things. And also you can develop some questions. Like, I'd expect a seasoned person that knows LLMs to be able to explain this and be able to understand this. If you need to do security research, which LLM would you use? Each one of these LLMs have distinct behaviors. They have safeguards, or whatever. Well, the answer is simple. You use Grok. Grok doesn't care. Like, if you need to do security research, you've got to use Grok. I remember rolling out Cursor at Canva, and the security red team couldn't use Cursor because it was using Anthropic models, and Anthropic was stopping it from using it. But as soon as we switched over to Grok, it's like, you can red team security all you like. Okay, if you needed to summarize a document, which LLM would you use, and why? Well, the answer is, you should use things like Gemini. Gemini is very good for summarizing documents. If you needed a task runner, something that could do tool calls, which LLM would you use? The answer is Anthropic. I've been able to put through essentially a 4-way quadrant that explains the different innate behaviors of these LLMs. You have high safety, which cares about social justice, and you've got low safety. Surprise, surprise. Grok doesn't care about social justice, right? And there's places where that properties is really good, like security safeguards up on Anthropic, but it's completely useless if you want to defend your company as a security practitioner. So you've got to use the right models for the right things. And you've got oracles and agentic. Oracles are like thinking, researchers, what else have you. And then you've got these agents, agentic. The way I like to describe Oracle is Oracle sits there and thinks forever. It just thinks. But it's terrible at getting stuff done. If anyone's used Gemini and it's seen that it's just spit out the output that it wants you to run, and you got frustrated, that's why OpenAI and that's why Gemini is more of a oracle rather than an agent. Whereas an agent, like things like Claude, it will incrementally get there. It's wrong most of the time, but sometimes it's right, and incrementally gets towards a successful outcome. Each of these LLMs have different behaviors, different quadrants, and I expect a candidate to be able to explain these. If they've been playing a bit, they should know. Their eyes should light up. So, the best way to determine if someone's skilled, if you're interviewing for someone with 2025 knowledge post-AI, is just to watch them. Just to watch them. But the idea of the filtering stages, I've been 9 months now figuring how do you filter people before that stage. I don't know. Those gates have been blown up. It's a real problem in our industry now, which is why hiring motions are very much going to word of mouth type things. So something I've also been thinking about for a long time is when people say AI doesn't work for them, what do they mean by that? For which identity are they coming from? Are they coming from an identity as a software engineer at a company or a software engineer themselves? Big distinction. Because employees trade time and skill for money, right? They want to remain relevant. They want to be able to have a job and want to be employable in the future. So it actually isn't a problem for a company as well. Because if AI is not working at a particular company, employees will naturally want to move on because they want to keep their skills current. This is one of the biggest shifts that's happened in our profession in a long time. One of the biggest shifts. There was a time when employees moved on from companies because they weren't adopting AWS. Why would it not, or any of the cloud infrastructure? If you're a DevOps engineer in 2025 without any cloud knowledge, you're not really employable. These type of dynamics are starting to happen. You see, it's really important that people put the time in and just play with these technologies. You see, there is a beauty in AI. There is a beauty in AI. The way I like to think about it, it's like a musical instrument. Musos don't pick up a guitar, give it a strum, and say, oh, the musical instrument's bad. Right? They don't say it's bad. They don't blame the musical instrument. What they do is they pick it up and they have a deliberate play. But I'm not talking about guitars, I'm talking about LLMs. They pick it up, they play, ooh, that's interesting, that's interesting, that's interesting, and then they use that interesting to compose together good outcomes. It's the open mind for exploration that matters. What they do is play, folks. They play, they have a look at what's possible. So last week I was hanging out with a friend on Zoom, drinking margaritas, and we're both reminiscing about COBOL. And next thing we're like, can AI program COBOL? We're pretty skunk drunk at this point, drinking margaritas. I'm like, hey, COBOL. And a couple of moments later, we're like, yeah, why not? We opened up our coding system and then built a calculator in COBOL. Why not? And we're just sitting there going, wow, what? Hey, is this going to be possible? Why not? Let's find out. In the spirit of play, we're just like, hey, can it create a reverse Polish notation calculator? And it turns out it can. We're just going, what the heck is going on here, folks? What else can AI do? What can it not and cannot do? Why is it able to create a calculator? And we're like, okay, let's write some unit tests. And it just did it in COBOL. I'm like, what? Let's up-level this. Let's create a reverse Polish notation calculator, but use emojis as operators. We're skunk drunk at this point. We're like, what's the stupidest thing AI can do? Let's just play. And we're like, does COBOL even support emojis? Well, there's one way to find out, folks. You just try, you play, and it turns out, yes, it is possible, and this is the world's first calculator in COBOL that uses emojis with reverse Polish notation. So it's really important to just really play with this and understand what is possible, what is not possible. When you find something that doesn't work, try it again in the next model release, and then maybe it works. It's important to do your reps, folks. So, some closing ponderoos that I've had over the last 10 months. There's a lot of hype in the AI space, and perhaps removing waste from your systems and processes is a bigger accelerator than AI. Absolutely. I've seen designers overloaded because engineers are able to output designs faster now. So the engineers are just idle. They're like, what do I do now? Like, the answer is the engineers should become designers. Similar. Figure out, look at your waste. Like, look at things like daily stand-ups. Like, all these things may not matter, may not make sense anymore. I know when I rolled it out, like our product velocity was so absurd that like it was overloading like the TPMs. Everything that's been designed needs to be rethought and rethought. The same way I've been thinking about IDEs, how we do software and how we deliver software from a product management. Everything is out the window and needs to be rethought, is my personal take after seeing what's possible. You see, ideas are everything now. There's an old saying that ideas are nothing, execution is everything. Well, how does that matter? Isn't that inverted now? You can literally just like speak a prompt into a coding agent, and next thing you know, you get outcomes. May not necessarily be the correct thing, but it gives you the shape of the thing. I saw product managers and sales engineers doing pull requests to the Canva code base. And the engineer was like, God, what are we going to do with this? Right? Because like they're sick of waiting for people, and these people had the domain knowledge, they knew what the customers want. So they just started opening up Cursor and they just vibe coding a thing. Doesn't mean it's going to be shippable, but it means anyone who has the idea can now ship. It's really weird. You've got to rethink about what it means. Because stories no longer start at 0%, folks. A Jira story no longer starts at 0%. If you're an engineer, you could be getting something that's 20% done, 70% done, maybe 10% done from the person who has the idea, who has the domain knowledge. It's your job to carry it over the line. Your job to carry it over the line. And this, for the engineers here, what is the point of open source libraries and libraries on open source now? This is really weird. The people around me who've been playing with this stuff, we're using less open source these days. Unless it's got network effects like PyTorch, Kubernetes, like we just vibe code it. Like how much time is your engineering org spent doing dependency updates and all this stuff for what benefit? Supply chain attacks? Like, so we're starting to see more first-party software because we can just generate our first party, all the dependencies, all the supply chain and all that noise and that garbage. Like it's becoming less of an issue now because we just like maintain everything from first party, and then we can customize it to the needs of the employer or client instead of taking the trade-offs of someone else's developed that software. So software engineers very much still have jobs now. There's a lot of hype saying that software, like you're not going to need software engineers. No, that's BS. Software engineers still have a job, but the job is different. You can't be a Jira monkey. If you're going to be a Jira ticket monkey, you're not going to be very employable in the future. You need to go up. You need to go up. You need to be a product engineer. Go up in the stack. Don't be a Jira ticket monkey. But it's kind of scary. It's scary, folks, because what we're seeing is the erasure of our identity functions. You go up to a software engineer, and it's like, hey, hi, I'm Jeff. And they're like, hi, I'm Bob. Hi, Bob. Sort of, oh, I'm a Golang developer. And they're like, cool, you're a Golang developer. And you see that there's a title in it. They've got their identity stuck in it. They spent 10 years developing Golang. None of that matters anymore. When I'm hiring software engineers now, I'm like, cool, you're a software engineer? You should know software engineering. Instead of spending 6 months, 8 months to learn Golang, like, here's a week. Go play with it, like, because you can just pick up things. This is kind of scary. This is why I'm seeing junior software engineers actually accelerate past mid software engineers because they're not stuck in this identity function erasure. But junior software engineers, unfortunately, don't have the experience, so they don't know when they're being BS'd. So it is kind of dangerous and scary. I've written about this, but there's a bit of a adoption curve of where it's successful and when it's not successful. But it's really scary because the identity function of what it means to be a software engineer has been erased and has been erasing. Folks, When I first gave this talk originally, in its first series, I said the future belongs to people who do things. This is probably the last time I gave this talk. I'm changing it to the future belongs to people who did things. This has been a very bad year to be asleep at the wheel as a software engineer. There was a time where you could spend $200 US and you could get $20,000 a month of free inferencing. It was all subsidized. Those who played in this point with all these VC subsidies and invested in themselves, they managed to get ahead into the future. They're ahead of the pack. They're always going to be a little bit ahead of the pack because, see, AI is still underpriced. These LLMs and tokens are still underpriced. So there's still time, but it's been a very bad time to be asleep at the wheel. I want you to go forward and you capitalize this moment in time while it's still accessible, still cheap, and do things. Thank you.